Good afternoon. Good first day for people so far? Show of hands, who flew in today? Who flew in Sunday? Who flew in last week Monday? Nobody. So my name is Bas Kamphuis. I lead some of the strategic ISV relationships that we have within AWS, SAP being one of them. And so today we'll talk a little bit about SAP and what we do for SAP customers, what we do jointly with SAP, and well, hopefully you find it a useful expense of your time for the next hour. So, and I hope this is becoming clear in the presentation as we walk through it. The public cloud has become a natural destination for SAP workloads, and that wasn't all logical initially. Obviously, the whole concept was virtualized commodity hardware initially, overutilized the hardware by sharing in multi-tenancy environments to drive down cost. For some of the SAP workloads that are the beating hearts of enterprise environments for either general ledger and financial purposes or HR, supply chain, these systems and the architecture doesn't necessarily fit all that well on commodity hardware, and we needed to do some special things to make it work. But we've been at it, right? So let's reflect a little bit on SAP, just by show of hands. How familiar are you guys with SAP's strategy currently? One individual. We should spend some time on this slide. So SAP is ultimately a business process application platform with many facets, and the bedrock of over 90% of the world's transactions that get booked, right? Especially in the Fortune 100, the Fortune 500, SAP's dominance in facilitating critical business processes and documenting what happened when we sell something or when we buy something, when we hire somebody, is on an SAP system. And SAP is transforming on two major dimensions. One of it is leveraging the hyperscale cloud to make it easier and drive out the cost of maintaining these SAP applications. But two, similar to what people are doing here at reInvent, is to consume services to help accelerate innovation. And one of them that's obviously very interesting for enterprise customers is that notion of machine learning, deep learning, IoT, data lakes, natural language, which gets captured in the intelligent enterprise, which is the mantra. Now, this vision is a great vision, but SAP customers know that what works today is something that actually needs to be protected. So typically, SAP environments are fairly stable and fairly well guarded inside the IT landscape, right? So there was a recent study. It goes about a year out now, where a company called Resulting IT did a study on what the overall sentiment was of the SAP implementations at customers. Now, only 36, now this is not just the IT group that proudly implemented the SAP system. These are also the business stakeholders that actually utilize and use the systems, like. Only 36% of the respondents felt that the system actually was delivered against the original plan that was set out. Only 30% felt that it actually came in on the budget that originally was allocated. And fewer than half, 48%, believes that the business value was achieved. Now, this is obviously a bit of a populistic way of asking customers, and is the answer easy to be found in, does the software work or not? Is it the complexity of the software? Is it the need to actually change business processes and adapt to the way SAP actually prescribes the best practice? Is it the SI community that makes it too hard to implement? Or is it the infrastructure barriers that actually are part of being successful with SAP? Now, we know by evidence that 90% of the enterprises actually rely on SAP systems, that the software per se is working just fine. If it works for the organization is, of course, a different matter, and there's complexity in that. Now within AWS, we have we're a pretty peculiar culture, in case you didn't notice. One of the things we do when we actually are looking at significant decisions is qualify the decision as a one-way or a two-way door decision. One-way door decisions are decisions that once you go through it, it's hard to go back to your original state. So, one-way door decisions are a reality. We all have to make them, but they require careful analysis. They probably require some modeling. They probably require some expert advice from some destination, or understanding what peers in your industry have done before when they were faced with these decisions. And we make one-way door decisions every day, but they're lengthy decision cycles. Jumping out of an airplane, one would argue, is a one-way door decision. It's really hard to get back in that airplane before it lands. Two-way door decisions are decisions where we say, stop overanalyzing it, just do it. Experience the other side. If it doesn't work out, you jump right back in. Now, my argument is that the hyperscale cloud, specifically AWS, when it comes to SAP environments, takes away all the traditional infrastructure barriers that customers contemplate before they accept the next innovation of SAP. Infrastructure comes at an hourly increment. Infrastructure can actually be ready and deployable within a half an hour. And I'll talk about some of the other things we actually have done around these SAP systems. Now let's talk a little bit about the alliance between SAP and AWS. We've actually been at it for more than a decade now. And I simplified the graph a little bit because over the last couple of years, there's really been an acceleration of that that flywheel effect. The number of innovations coming out of our partnership are actually increasing, and some are very significant. And it changed about 2-3 years ago. This was the first time that any hyperscaler decided to actually get into the 4-socket architecture, and it was predominantly based on the needs to serve HANA customers well. We had solutions that would serve HANA customers up to 244 gigabytes, which for some customers fit, but most customers said, I like the self-servers, I like the ability to provision, I like that I don't have to consume them more than an hour. And at the time, HANA was only available in appliance format from the traditional hardware providers, which was quite a purchase barrier, if you will. Now we came up with the X1, which was a 2 terabyte, fully software-defined virtualized solution, which was an industry first. We could scale that out to 14 terabyte. A year later, we introduced a 4 terabyte configuration, which could scale out to 50 terabytes for BW environments, so analytic workloads. Now, what happened this year was truly, and I'll talk more about it, another breakthrough. We actually got into bare metal. We recognized that with the core-to-memory limits that we actually have when we build HANA systems, virtualization, with its limit at 192 virtual cores, was going to get to a limit of how much memory could be addressed. So it was time to actually start looking at bare metal hardware in order to go beyond 4 terabytes. And maybe you can push it to 6 terabytes with some creative liberties, but ultimately we would get into a performance issue. So I'll talk more about that, but with that release, we also introduced a number of other innovations, and you see them there in orange. We introduced managed cloud solutions with HANA's HEC environment. We introduced a number of SAP, so the SAP Cloud Platform, regions and services. AWS now supporting about 6 regions worldwide to serve SAP customers as well, which is where SAP customers get to build and extend based on the environments that they're running. Concur, which is the travel and expense application, is either migrated, depending on which part in the world you are, either migrated or migrating to AWS. And then, of course, based on the government cloud, NS2 managed services as well as SuccessFactors runs on AWS. And that led to a phenomenal uptake of enterprise customers. A year ago, I probably could only show you half of these logos. 2 years ago, I could show you 4. There's a dramatic uptick in AWS underpinning SAP environments or extending SAP environments. And the reason, in part, is obviously the value proposition around the self-service platform that we provide, but also customers have a need to move to HANA. SAP at 2025 will no longer support the traditional database architectures, which means customers need HANA. If you need HANA, you need to rethink your infrastructure anyway, because the traditional servers that are standing in your data center right now won't serve you, right? And so with that, customers like AIG or British Petroleum, Del Monte, are actually some of the trailblazers that years ago decided that they would get to a cloud-first approach, even for mission-critical ERP environments. Now, since then, we started supporting a number of instance families, all of them certified to support SAP workloads. And SAP has a broad portfolio of solutions. So Oracle, DB2, Microsoft SQL are some of these databases that underpin the classic SAP solutions. Obviously, HANA comes in a data mart, a BW business warehouse, as well as a S4, the next generation of the ERP suite, CRM, PLM, etc. And it takes a wide range of instance families. Now, the beauty of all these instance families is that they're all software defined. So the ability to connect with them, to serve them, to do disaster recovery, failover, or to extend the SAP solutions is becoming a DevOps proposition, which resonates. Now, let's talk a little bit about the big release this year. So throughout the years, I reflected on, we started supplying HANA infrastructure to, in a virtualized environment, up to 4 terabytes. But we recognized that that was probably going to be the end of it, taking away some of the increases that we would get out of another Intel generation uplift in terms of the CPUs. It was never going to scale to some of the customers that were starting to ask for 20 terabytes or beyond. And so we bought a company and we created a platform called Nitro. And what Nitro basically does is it takes the I/O operations to connect the server with storage, network, and compute in the hardware. So it's silicon now, which means that the hardware is 100% addressable. And that is phenomenal. I mean, obviously it's my business, I get excited about this part, but this is a major breakthrough. If you think about the origin of AWS, at the base was virtualization. But because of these strategic partnerships, and VMware is part of that club, we're actually breaking through that and going to a bare metal supported model as well. Now, this is not bare metal like some of the other providers. It's not a colo under a management contract that you can buy through one of the major cloud providers. This truly is a self-service platform. We actually had a phenomenal customer of ours, Fast Retail, which is the Uniqlo brand, right? Stores around the world. Very rapid S4 implementation with HANA. When we launched this platform on Thursday, jointly with SAP in a press release and made it available in Tokyo, Uniqlo cut over in production to a 6 terabyte environment from their 4 terabyte environment in 2 hours on a Saturday night. That's what I mean when I say there's no more infrastructure barriers. The ability to actually jump and scale as you grow, the elasticity that this platform creates, has never been seen. And I've been around SAP infrastructure providers for a while. We've never seen that before. And we have some customers here that are going to be with us at the conference that have phenomenally different experiences when it comes to taking that one-way door concept to a two-way door concept. In terms of global availability, we serve SAP customers worldwide. We serve SAP customers in every industry segment that you can imagine. Obviously, SAP has a real dominance in manufacturing, supply chain type of operations, financial services, and healthcare and life science. So that's some of where we are choosing to prioritize deployments, and it's growing rapidly. We're rapidly adding regions and SAP capabilities in these regions based on customer demand, and it really is becoming a flywheel in terms of how we serve SAP customers. Now, this is probably an interesting slide, a little bit about how AWS differentiates against some of the other options customers have. Now, caveat here, I talked about the colo. Other providers may have a private cloud type offering as well. I'm not considering that here, because to me, that is not why you would even choose an AWS. You choose AWS for the agility and the speed that the platform comes with, and hopefully a very positive TCO proposition with that as well. If you compare that, the number of public references or the number of partners that actually can serve you are dramatically different. But what's more important is the performance. The published performance on these platforms is a factor of 4. 2 of the cloud providers never even published a benchmark publicly, which should make you wonder. The size is dramatic. When you look at the number of certifications, this becomes a very interesting proposition as well. AWS is certified for about every SAP solution and every database configuration underneath it. And for some of the customers I met today, some of them don't know when their HANA jump is, but they have database X, database Y right now. They may stay a little longer. They may actually transition to a migration to ASE. The cloud platform provider should support all databases so that you have the ultimate choice in what you want to do. And so that's quite different as well. So let's talk a little bit about the themes that we see with customers. This slide is not that new. We've used that, I think, last year at reInvent as well, but it very much applies to the SAP experience as well. We have a bunch of customers coming with a desire to retire the technical debt associated with these SAP propositions, and they like the agility of the platform and the speed in which they can actually apply fixes, changes, etc. And there's another dimension, usually customers that actually 1 or 2 years in, IDC just did a market survey and they discovered that SAP customers on AWS in the second year have a very different value experience with AWS as in the first year. The first year it's TCO and IT operations. The second year it's the extensibility and the ability to serve customers in net new ways, to actually adhere to the opportunity that the digital transformation, to use a very popular buzzword, and apply that to your SAP footprint. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple of use cases that we see on both of those dimensions. One is obviously the opportunity that software-defined environments provide when it comes to automation. With a methodology that we jointly created with SAP called Test Migration, or FAST is the project name, we're actually able to take on-prem deployed Oracle DB2 SQL environments, extract them out of a productive running SAP environment, move the files to AWS, and land it in a HANA or ASE destination. Automated, templatized, which means that we actually took a 40 terabyte Oracle system and were able to provide the customer with a HANA version of that Oracle system, which at that point in time was 10 terabytes, in less than 40 hours. We have other customers, some of them here at the conference, that actually took a productive 3 terabyte DB2 system and were able to see their ERP system running on HANA in less than 20 hours, 29 to be honest. So that's what I mean with the two-way door decision. Instead of running sizing reports, which actually as an AWS customer, there's no need to do that. Instead of actually trying to anticipate what custom code your team has built over the last 20 years in SAP systems and what will break. You get to actually experience it. For less than $1,000, you get to experience your productive system on AWS on a HANA destination. It's a very powerful proposition because at that point in time, you also can validate the business case. Is my MRP run faster? Is my month-end close easier to process? So we're seeing a lot of customers use this.
Can I ask a question?
Ask a question.
So you said like less than $1,000, right? So it's service provided by AWS?
Services provided by AWS. That said, all AWS provides you here is the tools and a Word document that explains you step by step how you would be able to do this yourself. Most of our GSIs, SI partners are able to execute this as well. We certify them actually on the use of these tools so they can execute this for you as well.
And I have a use case that can I combine SLO with EMO?
Let's answer that question after the session, and I'll help you out with that one. So with that, a little bit about systems of record and systems of innovation, which I think is a key differentiator when you think about AWS as a choice for your SAP environment. At the foundation layer, the infrastructure continues to operate, but it very much needs to be a system that you can rely on. Network speeds continually increase, instance types get added, the ability to actually scale, backup, disaster recovery, the global reach of AWS are dependencies that you want to rely on. At that point in time, you also want to make sure that all databases that SAP requires are certified for productive use. On top of that, your choices become more agile. We see customers going straight to S/4HANA, many of them these days, but we see some other customers that just want to lift and shift to then do the migration on their terms next year. Or we see customers that take interim steps to an ASC database or suite on HANA before they go all the way to S/4HANA. All these choices can be made and relatively quick. I'll show you some customer examples then. Now, on top of that, the phenomenal pace of innovation, and I'm looking forward to Wednesday and Thursday with Andy and Werner, all these services become accessible. We're actually running a workshop right now where we're showing the power of deep lens image recognition on spare parts like bolts and machine parts to actually interact with an SAP plant maintenance system. All these demos that people are creating these days take a week, 2 weeks to actually validate a concept, right? Which is the power of the platform as a whole. Now, one major customer that actually did a very successful migration this year and who was with us at Sapphire is actually a insurance and financial services client called AIG. I'm sure everybody's familiar with them. But they are all in on their journey to actually move over. And they're seeing a dramatic performance improvement, as well as obviously a reduction in database size, which is not AWS's biggest contribution, but actually SAP with HANA. But where it actually starts to get monetized is in that annual run rate reduction. Half of it gets shaven off the system. You think about it, traditional SAP environments get bought for at least 4 years of growth. That's not needed for AIG under SAP systems on AWS. They grow as they go. They continue to add, right? Now then a little bit about the innovation. And as said, AWS is for most SAP engineering teams the development platform. They support most platforms, I have to say, full disclosure. But AWS is the platform that the offerings get developed on, right? So SAP's cloud platform runs through Cloud Foundry on AWS. And we've been doing that for years together with Björn Gerke's team in SAP. And we have currently 6 regions, with 3 more being released in the next quarter or 2, available worldwide. And if you actually then, in the bottom right, start looking at the services that are available, you understand that the advance, the head start that AWS has is very much alive also when it comes to SAP native offerings like Cloud Platform. Now what we're doing right now is actually starting to extend SCP with Alexa and other type of machine learning type of scenarios, translate type services. We're starting to figure out how we actually help customers as customers start to rely on these platforms. They want to use some of those native AWS services in joint concert with the SAP services, which means that the barriers to innovate are a lot lower as well. And so a little word on how to think about these architectures. Frequent requests, when do I use what platform? Which I think is a little bit less important, and it depends on your IT strategy to actually get the ideal mix here. But what is valuable is to look at infrastructure as the layer that is built to last, yet has to be flexible enough to be upgraded, to be innovated, to actually take the benefits of the pace of innovation. So rely on your cloud provider for infrastructure. On top of that, deploy your solution in the applications, but those are not built to last, those are actually built to consume. That's the bedrock of where the ultimate truth is. SAP is taking a very interesting approach with a product called the Data Management Suite, where the cleanest version of a customer master record, the cleanest version of a product is going to be in one source in the SAP landscape. And all SAP solutions will point to that one source instead of replicating the data. Leverage that IP to consume that data. But on top of that, strive for agility. The layers that actually sit on top of that, be it SAP Cloud Forum or AWS natively, they should be built to change constantly. The consumption layer there is much more interesting as you start thinking about how do I use image recognition, or how do I create an IoT sensor input in my facilities that actually leads to a better decision criteria. That's gonna immensely evolve over the next year, and it already has been evolving, right? But create flexibility and agility at that layer. And so if you think about one of our older customer, Brooks Brothers, they took a very practical approach to that philosophy. In retail, SAP is very frequently updating, and changes are obviously frequent, and margins are thin. So one of the reasons Brooks Brothers actually chose AWS is because when SAP comes up with an enhancement pack or a support pack specifically for CAR, which is the catalog for retailers, Brooks Brothers can take a copy of production in about an hour, apply the patching or apply the upgrade, determine for a few days with their functional experts if this actually is of benefit to Brooks Brothers. If not, they shut it down. If they like it, they continue to develop. So what use cases do we see? Obviously, we see a lot of migrations, which makes sense. Number two is the most frequent scenario that we see today, which is the business transformation towards a digital transformation type scenario, HANA being at the core, the real-time enterprise. Now, from there, number three kicks in. How do we actually extend these SAP solutions? How do I connect it to other mission-critical systems or to systems of engagement? And then obviously we see, especially in the partner community, a lot of demand to architect these environments for resiliency and security and to operate them as a managed service. Now with that, we actually proudly announced we have Sanjay with us, who is going to talk a little bit more about what a company named E&J Gallo has done with the digital transformation. Sanjay, would you mind joining me? How was your Black Friday?
It was phenomenal.
Was it good?
You know, good times, bad times, people drink.
I would reckon that most people bought the wine in advance of Black Friday.
Yeah, that's basically, I mean, for us, we operate in a 3-tier system, right, in the US. So what ends up happening is most people don't realize this, but the wineries don't sell to the end consumer. They actually sell to distributors who sell to retailers and who then sell to...
I could see that. I've always had this interesting business idea, Sanjay. I think if we could sell wine in sippy cups on Black Friday in malls, it would be a business.
It would. You know, we have products, not sippy cups, but now there's cans for the beach.
Right, yeah.
There's zips, these plastic cups that one serves, cups for nightclubs and things like that. The stuff is expanding from a new products perspective quite rapidly.
So, E&J Gallo, a phenomenally interesting company. Tell the audience a little bit more about what you do, your market position.
Sure. So E&J Gallo is the world's oldest winery and the largest at this point. Surprising, considering it's from the New World, but that's one of the claims to fame. It's 85 years old. We are now at this point probably the dominant player in the US market. We are about, 100 million cases of product is what we sell every year, which translates to about 1.4 billion bottles. We've got about 190 brands. It's a privately owned company, started in 1933, right after Prohibition, by Ernest and Julio Gallo. It's a completely vertically integrated ecosystem of companies. So by that I mean we own our own sand mines, we own our own bottling plant, which is huge, by the way, rivals Owen Corning, our own cork, our own label manufacturers, logistics companies, including our distributors. It's an ecosystem of companies, and IT is kind of central to supporting that entire ecosystem and managing the investments. So we have recently put in SAP S/4HANA with Deloitte, which has been incredibly successful. We did it in about, I would say, the release one at least, went in about 9 months. So it's been a very great journey. Release 2 will go in February, which will be our manufacturing side, and it's hosted on AWS. So it's been very, very positive for us.
Now, there was a recent article in the Wall Street Journal that kind of talked about your digital vision for the next 4 or 5 years, your business strategy evolving as well. It's obviously a very competitive market. What does that mean for you as the CIO and how you think about this opportunity?
Well, it's an interesting question, right? Traditionally, CIOs are driven by two things, right? Well, you're driven to reduce cost and to keep getting rid of technical debt, right? At Gallo, IT is used to not only do those two things, but actually help drive the strategic imperatives for this ecosystem of companies that I was talking about, right? So we're helping drive new business models in terms of how wine is made, how wine is purchased, how we have relationships with our customers. How do we start playing in the e-commerce space? How do we start playing in the direct-to-consumer space? Simultaneously not giving up on the three-tiered system that exists today. We partnered heavily with Amazon about 2 years ago. We were one of their biggest sellers of wine on the Amazon marketplace. And then after the Whole Foods purchase, you had to get out of that business. But we've created what we call a Wine OS platform that supports a three-tiered model, plus 3 different avenues for implementing e-commerce. One is e-retail as such. So how do we help the Krogers of the world, the Walmarts of the world, sell wine, or Harris Teeters for that matter, right? Help them manage the content from a digital perspective. That's one avenue. The other is direct-to-consumer out of our tasting rooms in Napa Valley and Sonoma. How do we enable the end consumer to participate in buying a wine club or transacting in an e-commerce platform? And then the third is we launched 2 e-commerce sites, thebarrelroom.com and then Esther and Ethel. Both have been very successful. where for about 32 states, we're allowed to ship wine directly to the end consumer. So we're participating in that as well. Now, all of this is built on what we call our Wine OS platform, but it's basically 4 different puzzle pieces: Salesforce, SAP, Elastic Path from an e-commerce engine perspective, and Clover from a point of sale perspective, all housed around the Amazon API gateway using Lambda to help drive the e-commerce channel, right? So we've created a unique platform that supports all 3 of our needs from a business model perspective. And that way, that agility that you were talking about earlier, Baz, is easy for us to achieve. Today, so regardless if it's a Harris Teeters who wants something, or a Drizzly who wants something, or a custom marketplace who wants something, it's a singular platform that is exposed in a different way from a chassis perspective because of our utilization of the Amazon API gateway.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit in advance of this session, obviously. You talked about how there's this notion that CIOs should be fighting for a seat at the boardroom table.
Yeah.
And you have a very different perspective on that.
Well, it's kind of interesting, right? For us, the Gallo family, our CEO, our board, about 5 years ago, viewed technology as a core competitive advantage, right? Not just in creating an e-commerce website or putting in a new ERP system. So for me, when I joined the winery about 4 years ago, we already had a seat at the table. But fighting for the seat at the table is an interesting conversation. You shouldn't have to fight for the seat at the table. You should be invited in. And the only way you can be invited in is if you can help create new business models and business transformation of new ways of adding value. And fundamentally, when I talk about Wine OS, when I talk about our SAP implementations, these are new business models, new ways of interacting for E&J Gallo with their end consumer. With that, automatically you get invited to the table. Yeah. As a voice for transformation, not just digital transformation. Hey, look, we all know that's just the words of the moment, right? B2B, e-commerce, whatever you want to call it. It's just getting a voice who is technically proficient at the boardroom level, at the most senior, what we call the ELT level, at Gallo is important, or is important at any company. Having a void there tends for you to be playing catch up.
Very well put. And so which SAP solutions is the foundation? You mentioned S4.
Yeah, I've got to tell you about our journey though. I mean, so the winery, while being very proactive in terms of technology, had put in JD Edwards about 22 years ago.
It's about to break through, is what I heard.
Yeah, it works still, don't get me wrong. But we were running out of hardware. In another 2 years, I would have had to start buying parts in eBay to keep it running. So at this point, there was all this technical debt. We had to keep it running. The business models had changed. And we chose SAP. Why? Because we really liked HANA and we liked the S4 version. When we implemented it, it wasn't easy, but it was very successful because we got a good partner with Deloitte, but we also had a really good partner in SAP. They've been very positive with us in terms of trying to help us and us help them not modify the product, but at least have involvement in the development of the roadmap for agricultural businesses. And that's been very important. Now, in terms of what have we implemented, we've got SuccessFactors, Concur, Ariba, the S4 core, plus Enterprise EDW on HANA.
Sure.
We're now looking at EWM for our warehouse management. Now that's where it starts getting interesting. All of these other pieces are on cloud or some sort of a private cloud platforms, either AWS or our hosted ones. We're planning on moving it all into one unified platform once our implementation completes. But when we start talking about manufacturing and warehouse management systems, we are a little hesitant to put it on AWS or the cloud, and primarily because of the locations that we're in.
Yeah.
We're in pretty remote locations in California, and there's only one, I would say, telecommunications provider usually, and one bad fire and it's out for 6 months at a time, or floods, and as you can imagine, the last 2 years haven't been easy for us. So that's why the cloud platforms for those specific solutions, we're a little hesitant to put that in.
Makes sense.
But we might move to that as we start getting more and more coverage, as Google Fiber starts coming, as some of these other telecommunication companies start investing in these areas.
Thank you. So now you mentioned Deloitte helped you. Can you tell me a little bit how the partner community, Deloitte specifically, helped on this journey, both on the SAP side and Wine OS?
So for us, from an SAP side specifically is where we've partnered with Deloitte. When I look at a partner, we needed to, we went through the traditional RFP process, and we had Accenture, Deloitte, you name it, was in that mix. SAP Consulting. We looked for somebody who was actually culturally a fit for us, and two, who would challenge us actively, right? And most clients, most customers don't want that. They say they want that, but they don't really want that, right? So our partner in Deloitte actively challenges us to get our people to work harder or work smarter, or, hey, look, this solution you're putting in, it's a complete failure. It's not going to work. This design decision you're making is wrong. It's it's not a collegial relationship as such, but we didn't want it like that either. We wanted a relationship with our partners based on fact and based on achieving an end outcome, not on just getting along. But that's Gallo culture in general. It's a private company. We don't have to bow to Wall Street every quarter. It's all about a business outcome that we're trying to achieve. And that's why we chose Deloitte. And it's been very, very successful for us.
Very good. Now, you're using, as we went through the presentation, a lot of the infrastructure components, but you mentioned Lambda, you mentioned the API gateway.
Yeah.
What is the value of AWS? How are we helping you in your transformation agenda from your point of view?
Speed.
Speed?
Speed. Scalability, yeah, but I mean, I hate to say this, but scalability, you're all the same. I know you don't want to hear that, but that's the fact. But where AWS has, from my perspective, a big, huge advantage over anybody else is the microservices and the ability that you guys have delivered for unique services to be created across, whether machine learning, we're using some of that, some of your visual recognition stuff, some of your pseudo AI stuff. AI is not yet achieved. I know everyone says it's there, but it's not.
Agree.
All of these components that AWS has, we evaluated Google, we evaluated Microsoft. No one is as close as you guys are. You're way ahead of them. And these services, these solutions have given us the ability to implement changes to our business models with speed. Not necessarily agility, but speed. And that is why we've gone with AWS foundationally.
Well, thank you very much for the very kind words. Sanjay, I wanted to thank you. Any questions in the audience before I let Sanjay go?
So what was the total size you moved on core ECC from ECC to S4?
We didn't do ECC. JD Edwards to S4.
What was the size?
About 3 terabytes, something like that.
So the question was, what was the size of the JD Edwards move to the S4 destination?
But we're not moving all 3 terabytes, right? Because there's historical data that you're going to move it away.
What did you use to migrate?
I do not know. I'll have to go find that out. I don't remember.
That's what my question leads to again, because we have used a scenario that I want to pull only certain data from the legacy system into the S4.
Yeah, so the question is, I want to use only a subset of the data out of the legacy systems. And let's talk after the session. There's several partners that specialize in extracting data that work very closely with us, especially when it comes down to a greenfield implementation, which Sanjay did, obviously.
We did an Epoch implementation, right? So we said, okay, up to this many years, we're going to keep, and then it's a new world. If you wanted it, okay, we'll create a new way of interacting with that data. It won't be as clean, right? So you might have, so for wine, it's surprising, right? But we have to maintain data that goes back decades and decades and decades, primarily because it's a food, technically, right? And it lasts forever, even though there's yet to be a bacteria that survives in alcohol, but we still have to maintain traceability. Yeah.
Interesting.
So that is why we maintain a lot of that data, but it's not going to be all moved into SAP. Sure.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh. Thank you, sir. Let's see. And then the last pillar, to kind of get you back up where the presentation was going. So what Sanjay explained was the whole reason to put an SAP environment on AWS for the ability to accelerate, which is huge. A last use case is really reducing risk. As AWS, and I assume a number of you are experts in this room, we have a number of very fine-grained security controls. We have the biggest portfolio of certifications and compliance certificates as well, which allows us to, for instance, serve the intelligence community in the US or in some other parts of the world. Now, the platform as a whole, the global scalability is massive, and as I already indicated, there's many regions being added, both for the assets that run in SAP as well as the customers that deploy their SAP environments directly. And then last, that cost-optimized infrastructure is also very applicable to SAP environments on the AWS. Now, obviously, for disaster recovery and high availability, you can do the traditional model of master-slave, active-active, in order for a failover to actually bring up your secondary solution in a different part of the world instantly. But we have also CloudWatch, which very much applies to SAP environments as well, that as soon as it notices that the server is down, it will rebuild the system. Now, obviously, very different RPO, RTO type propositions, but for $1 a month, an on-scene proposition in a traditional environment, right? And then we have this cost-optimized HA, where we keep the row-level tables actually resident, and we rebuild the system the moment that we notice something is down. A little bit longer time to recover, but certainly a lot cheaper than having a full copy that nobody is using for a disastrous recovery period, right? So to conclude that all, we do believe that the next decades of SAP implementations are going to be very different. Not just AWS, but the hyperscale cloud underneath the innovations that SAP is introducing. The no longer having any infrastructure barriers leads you to the capability to experience things before you make one-way door decisions, which leads us to the experiences that we've seen. And we had AIG, we had Bristol Myers, we had E&J Gallo, we had Del Monte. All of them are actually reporting back that they have dramatically accelerated the migration plans and the project implementations that they're running, because the infrastructure is immediately there, because they can try things. Should I move Solution Manager, satellite solution, to ASE, or should I move it to HANA? You can run both in parallel. The budget propositions are very predictable as well. I know there's issues that some customers experience with getting too much adoption on AWS and it isn't controlled. But in SAP environments, the price from 1 terabyte to 2 terabytes to 4 terabytes to 12 terabytes and later 18 and 24 terabytes is linear. And I implore you, you will not see that in the industry. As soon as you go to higher socket systems, you get a dramatic price increase. But the purchasing power of AWS is not changing just because there's additional sockets in there. So it is a great TCO proposition. And then reflecting on Sanjay's story, the ability to actually implement a mission-critical core system with S4 in a record time, and then being able to extend it to serve new routes to market, to serve new customer segments, to differentiate how you engage with your customer segments is a real value proposition that I think is actually going to derive a competitive advantage. So in terms of what can you do next? If you want to learn more, just go to our website. SAP is an entire section. All this information is there. You can find us. You can reach out to us. I really encourage you to just experience. Experience AWS and SAP together. There's really not a high entry barrier. And once you experience it, you'll see a very different capability emerging out of IT in serving our business constituents. And if you need help, as you asked, there's a lot of partners that have both at the technology, the software, and the services level really delivered key strengths on enabling SAP customers running on AWS. Deloitte, a great partner that helped us with Gallo, has an entire cloud orchestration suite specifically designed for SAP workloads on AWS, and et cetera, et cetera. Again, you can find it on the website or reach out to me. Happy to answer any questions. With that, thank you for your attention and go enjoy your evening.